And we're back. Episode 2.
EP.02.
You're in the
Sorry?
hot seat. Welcome.
Thanks. Good to be back on our podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say you're not really a special guest. You're one of the regular hosts here, but thank you for being on the podcast. Now today, I think we promised in our last episode that we were going to talk a little bit about how people access medicinal cannabis in Australia. So I think as an overarching theme, again, I know we said this on the first one, we're not doctors, we're not trying to give you health advice. Always speak to your healthcare professional. But really the purpose of today is just to arm you with information so that you can make a call on whether or not you want to pursue looking into it, or whether you're thinking, no, not for me. So
maybe just to talk about it generally, in fact, even.
Oh, we could do that. What do you reckon?
It might also pay to give a little bit of background on us as well. We didn't do that in the first one, but we should probably do that in the second one.
All right. Let's launch into it. I feel like my story is less interesting than yours. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to do yours first, and then I'll come in at the end and just...
Don't you save the best for last, though?
Yeah, that's true. All right. So hi, everyone. My name is Andrew. I just thought I'd mix things up. I am a lawyer, a qualified lawyer. And I have been, I guess, working in this business with Mitch of Medicinal Cannabis for probably the last 3 years. We registered a company, would have been the year after there was the first legalization of medicinal cannabis in Australia, which occurred here in Victoria, where we're based. But my interest in the field really goes back a lot further than that. I spent some time in America, and I got to witness what a free recreational and medicinal market looks like. And I guess it sparked a bit of a passion, and I'll let Mitch in a moment talk a little bit about his story, but we kind of coalesced together in 2017, and we just decided, why don't we get into this space a little bit more actively? And fast forward 3 years, and I would say the clear mark of our involvement in the space is the fact that we're now doing podcasts about it. So that's surely means we're taking it pretty seriously. So I'm going to hand over to Mitch, and he's going to tell you his interesting story. And yeah, whoop-de-doo, we saved the best till last. So go for it, Mitch.
I was actually kidding, but thank you for doing that anyway. I feel like there was a little bit that you kind of skipped over there. We've been pretty much best mates since high school, and we've been involved in various things over the years, but not business. And now we're kind of involved on a passion project that is cannabis. I come from a bit more of a cannabis history. I've also studied quite a bit, but I worked and lived on the cannabis farm for quite a bit in the States. My family has been prolific in the, or at least involved in the genetic seed side of things for many years. And I've been around medicinal and cannabis otherwise in various parts of the world for my entire life. Been exposed to the growing and some of the secrets of the trade from the early 90s onwards, basically. This definitely runs deep in the family. And then I obviously studied, not obviously, but I studied psychology at my undergrad, and did a master's in commerce, and did all the academic stuff that I needed to actually give me enough of an understanding to now apply this in more of a serious way. But it's definitely great to be working on a passion project. So I guess that's enough about our intros, but more importantly, what you want to know about, which is the access of medicinal cannabis, Andrew, first port of call.
No, absolutely. And I guess, because there is that legal framework as there is in most countries, I guess that's my native space these days as a lawyer. But before I do jump into that, I just want to give credit where credit's due. Mitch did spend a year, I mean, you brushed over it, but you spent a year on a farm in, I think it was Washington State, so far northwest of America, and you were about, 4 or 5 hours east of Seattle.
Yeah, middle of nowhere essentially, but that's where some of the best cannabis comes from, I guess. But yeah, no, it was a raised desert kind of area, the Okanagan region, and yeah, they spent a lot of time really honing the skills of growing and cloning and planting seeds, and basically, working from the greenhouse, working outdoors, working to build better plants, or grow better plants, and learning about the effects of sulfur and NPKs and all that kind of stuff to make sure that you have the sexiest looking plants, because it's quite competitive in America and you need those trichomes to really pop. And this might be a little bit of jargon for those of you who are just starting the journey, but you'll definitely get to learn about that as we go along.
Absolutely. No,
but yeah, that's
love that. And I presume the horticultural feather in your cap complemented your commerce and psych studies quite well. And I feel like you've got the full suite to understand the cannabis business.
I think I did more commerce and psych studies on that farm than I actually did at university. But there was, yeah, it was definitely a whirlwind, and it was great. And also extraction was another very interesting part that I was exposed to. So very lucky to have had that experience. And yeah, hopefully we can start disseminating some more information to people that is of value. But yeah, it's slightly different over there in America. You can just kind of get it, especially in a state where it's legalized, as opposed to what we have to do here in Australia, which is a little bit more what's the
regulated.
word? Regulated is definitely the word. That's the perfect word, in fact.
And it is a perfect segue to the access discussion, because you're talking about this deregulated scenario over there with the recreational and to a large extent the medicinal market, whereas in Australia, nothing could be further from that environment. I also feel like people listening to this podcast are going to be Googling poppin' trichomes right about now. Which,
Trikes.
Yeah, poppin' trikes. So if you are, that's great. You'll get
Is that an expression? Poppin' trikes?
Poppin' trikes. I don't know. I will Google that after this recording. But all right. So the access discussion. So nuts and bolts of it. I'm just going to dive right in here.
Please do.
So in 2016, Victoria became the first state in Australia to legalize medicinal cannabis. And, this came off the back of quite a lot of lobbying that had been done. Some people might be familiar with Lucy Haslam, who's quite a passionate cannabis advocate in Australia. And there were plenty of others as well. I recall just before 2016 seeing a really big push. I know that Fiona Patten, a politician here in Victoria, was a big part of it, but it was around, and the Premier Daniel Andrews made announcements around access in the context of helping really, really sick people who could be assisted with medicinal cannabis as kind of a last line of therapy, or certainly not the first line of therapy. And I'm thinking kids who maybe suffered from child epilepsy, and then we had cancer patients who needed relief from nausea when they were going through chemotherapy, and people in palliative care. So I say all of that because I think that backdrop is really important to understand, that the only place that the government in the early days saw for cannabis was this kind of, you've failed at everything else, so we're going to now open the door to cannabis as your very last resort. So Victoria was the first state, and what followed was a domino effect among the other states. And I'm not even going to try and guess the order because I don't know, but all of the other states have followed suit. And what the federal government needed to do at that point was to harmonize Commonwealth laws, the Narcotics Act, Commonwealth legislation, to ensure that cannabis, which was treated as a sort of prohibited substance in Australia, could be permitted in Australia for medicinal purposes, to give effect to the states which had enacted access to medicinal cannabis legislation. So that was where it all kicked off in 2016. And I guess from the people listening to this podcast, they're thinking, yeah, thanks for the history lesson, but I just want to
That's what I was
access.
going to say. That's not really how do I get it, but it's nice
I
for the
know,
context.
no, and the context though, I think will shape people's understanding in terms of when they do go to see their doctor.
Yeah, it's
You've
good.
got to understand the framework that we're operating in Australia, because it is a very conservative framework comparative to other countries around the world. We are, I would say, proceeding with extreme levels of caution. And Australia and
It's very responsible.
it's very responsible. Some might throw around the term nanny state, but the idea is that we have a cautious regulatory approach because the TGA, our medicines regulator, in order to have medicines which are approved by the TGA, they need to prove safety, quality, and efficacy. And at the moment, there just isn't the level of clinical research available for the myriad of what are termed unapproved therapeutic goods that are medicinal cannabis products in Australia to warrant those products being approved. So I guess I say all of that because if you're the patient and you go to see your GP and you say, Doc, I'm interested in trying medicinal cannabis for insomnia or anxiety, you need to understand that the first requirement is that you have to have failed at a more conventional treatment for that indication that you've presented with. Now, in terms of what are we talking about with a conventional treatment? Well, we're talking about something that will be perhaps registered on the Australian Register of Therapeutic Goods, which is our list of approved medicines.
So it's an example of that.
A good example of that. So let's say someone presenting with anxiety, perhaps an SSRI antidepressant medication like Lexapro. You might have to have received a script for that, failed at it, or when I say failed, I mean it didn't do much for you, or you might have issues with the side effects, notwithstanding that was actually efficacious to you. And in those circumstances, the doctor there then has a clinical justification that that he or she can rely upon in prescribing you a medicinal cannabis product. And I say prescribing because, of course, all medicinal cannabis products are prescription-only medicines.
But it's really at their discretion still. Like it's not all doctors are keen on medicinal cannabis, as we've kind of seeing out there. It's growing in popularity, but it's still quite a discretionary drug, I guess.
And we're not talking about discretion in the sense of, the recreational cannabis user going and seeing their dealer and the dealer being like, I just don't feel like giving you product today. We're talking about someone actually needing to understand your indication, what your condition is, what your history of treatment for that condition is, whether or not you've had any bad side effects. So all of these factors.
Contraindications, so other health considerations that might affect whether it's actually right for that person as well.
And I think it's fair to say as well that I guess the level of information out there, or I should say the level of knowledge out there in the community, in a way is parallel to the level of education that exists in the medical community. So you will have different levels of knowledge among doctors around cannabis as a medicine. And that's important because you need to understand that you as a patient might actually go to see a doctor, and the doctor might be well versed on conventional medicines for your condition, but they might not have ever had someone present with your condition who is seeking access to medicinal cannabis. And so in those circumstances, you'd expect a doctor to be a little bit more, I guess, cautious in recommending that as a treatment because they have no clinical experience in treating that problem with that medicine. So these are all things for you to consider. Now, are there ways through this? Of course there are. So the first thing you could do is you could go to see a specialist doctor who has, I say specialist cannabis doctor. So all around the country, since legalization has occurred, you're seeing these specialist cannabis clinics where the doctors at these clinics are experts in cannabis medicine, and will have.
So it's kind of like when you've got a problem with your foot, you get a referral to a podiatrist.
Absolutely, exactly. So, that's the first step. So that's obviously that removes potentially the barrier of any, I guess, level of ignorance on the part of your doctor. I think if you roll the dice and you just go and see your local GP, you really don't know whether or not they know anything about cannabis medicine, or indeed whether or not they're of a mind to prescribe it. And as you pointed out before, Mitch, it really is this whole system that we have in Australia is, of course, while it is prescription only, predicated on the doctor's call and the doctor's discretion. Now there is, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, in subsequent podcasts, there is a push at the moment for certain medicinal cannabis products, namely CBD products with a concentration of 98% or more CBD, which are currently deemed Schedule 4 entry-level prescription medicines, to be descheduled to Schedule 3 over-the-counter medicines.
So what does that mean? You're going to go, instead of going to the doctor,
you go to the pharmacy and you talk to the pharmacist in the same way that you would about other S3 products like Codral Original. Pseudoephedrine is the active in that one. And you basically say to the pharmacist, these are my conditions. I've got some chronic pain, or I've got insomnia. And,
okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, I want to take it back a step. That's all great context, but for the average person out there looking for access to medicinal cannabis, I feel like we can distill it down into maybe a very succinct kind of step by step kind of
absolutely
process, which might be a little bit more helpful at this point. If you're just starting a journey, the first thing you do, I guess, is go see a doctor, because you don't actually won't know if they're advocates or not, or feel that it would benefit you or not, until you actually talk to them. So that's the first thing, right? You go to the doctor, you speak to your GP, and you say, "Doc, I've heard about medicinal cannabis. Is it going to be right for me? Do you know much about it? Is it going to help?"
Yeah. And I think at that point, I mean, if presuming the doctor knows a thing or two about the process for prescribing an unapproved therapeutic good, which most medicinal cannabis products in Australia are considered by law, the doctor will know that they will need to ask questions of you about, what is your treatment history? What is your mental health history? Have you suffered any side effects? How long have you had the condition for? So these are just some of the questions that as a patient you can expect to be asked as part of, I guess, the triage process to see if you are suitable for medicinal cannabis treatment. So that's the first step. You go to the doctor and you discuss medicinal cannabis and in the context of your condition and history of treatment.
So then the doctor's going to say either yes or no, basically. So maybe we'll look at what happens in both of those scenarios. In a yes scenario.
Yeah, I was going to start with the no scenario.
Okay, go to the no.
Go and see another doctor.
You always start with a no.
Yeah. But no, if it is a no and you're getting the sense that, well, this is, it's my family doctor for the last 30 years and he or she is just a little bit unfamiliar with this type of treatment, it might be suitable at that point to maybe just say to your doctor, do you know any other doctors who are specialists in this area that might be able to discuss this with me? Or alternatively, consult Google or another search engine, and you'll be able to bring up a host of options. And many will do telehealth appointments, but they will, in most cases, need to interact at some level with your treating GP, because they'll need to obtain copies of your medical history so that they can satisfy themselves about what your history is.
That's obviously not to detract from the fact that maybe your doctor is telling you that cannabis isn't good for you for a specific reason.
Yeah.
I think we should delineate between the fact that if the doctor's telling you, no, you're at high risk for, certain kind of situation, maybe you're sensitive to THC, maybe you have a heart condition that might interact in the wrong way. That's not the case where you should really be seeking out another point of view, because your doctor is probably the most likely to know your status in terms of health. So, but if your doctor's coming across as more of, maybe doesn't understand medicinal cannabis or isn't interested in it, I think that's more of the scenario where you might seek a second opinion, is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a really good point. And that's probably why when people have asked me, which doctor should I go and see, I do generally recommend cannabis clinics, because I think that whether the answer is yes or no, it will be a more informed yes or no, in my opinion, if it comes from someone that actually knows about cannabis usage as a medicine. If it is just the local GP, I'd be saying, go get a second opinion, not to take away from that GP's work. But yeah, I think that it's important to do that.
Yeah, well, I guess cannabis specialists are dealing with it day in, day out, seeing the kinds of people who respond well, the kinds of people who don't respond well, and it will really have a good take on your, position or susceptibility to adverse reactions, or, your risk profile, I guess. So maybe that's very valid.
Absolutely. So
yes.
I'll dive into I guess once you've got the recommendation, so the doctor gives you the yes or no, and let's say they say yes. I just, at this point, I'm going to give a very nutshell version of of what can happen, because basically the medicines regulator in Australia, the TGA, has two streams for the way that you might access medicinal cannabis. So one stream is called the Special Access Scheme, and this is where your doctor will basically submit an application on your behalf to the TGA to get access for unapproved therapeutic goods. So in this case, most medicinal cannabis products in Australia fall into that category. And it's done on a per patient basis, and it's time consuming for your doctor. They have to basically provide the TGA with a clinical justification for why it is that you should be prescribed medicinal cannabis products. And
probably about 10, 15 minutes, I'd say.
Yeah. And, practice makes perfect. But
that adds up when you're seeing a lot of patients. It's quite a lot of work.
It does. And I think with that, the TGA developed the second stream, which is called the Authorized Prescriber Scheme. And this is where doctors of their own volition can make an application to the TGA to become what is called an authorized prescriber of medicinal cannabis products. And they basically have to demonstrate that they have sufficient knowledge about the way that medicinal cannabis can be used to treat certain conditions of patients that they have seen at their clinic. And the scope of what they are authorized to do by the TGA will be on a per doctor basis, but generally speaking, an authorized prescriber will be authorized by the TGA to prescribe certain products for certain indications. So it might be product X, you are authorized to prescribe that without doing an SAS, Special Access Scheme, application to the TGA, where you go through the nuts and bolts. We are satisfied that you have sufficient knowledge and understanding of medicinal cannabis to be able to just write a script for that product to treat a certain condition that a patient has presented with.
Yeah.
So it's a faster process, but in any event, the fruits of both of those schemes are that ultimately your doctor will write you a prescription. Sure, that's a no-brainer. But if you also were subject to a special access scheme application, your doctor will send to a pharmacy that is preferably near where you live, a copy of the prescription and your special access scheme approval. So you have to wait for the TGA to give a formal letter of approval under the SAS. Or if they are an authorized prescriber, they will just send the script because the TGA is satisfied that they are permitted to do that. And do you want to take over from here, Mitch? Because I've been waxing lyrical a little bit.
No, it's good. I think you're nailing it. I would say that there's also actually the SAS-A, but
yeah, that's true. Oh,
that's a whole nother kettle of fish. But yeah, essentially, that you can get. Basically, any doctor can immediately prescribe you cannabis without having to wait if you are deemed to be terminally ill and you've something. Is it 6 months? I believe is expected.
Yeah, I think it might be. And so the special access scheme has 3 categories: category A, B, and C. I mean, it wouldn't be confusing enough if we didn't break it down into 3 sub-regulations. And don't I just love it? But
I actually do.
But most medicinal cannabis, I guess, patients under the special access scheme fall under category B. Now, this is the category where you do actually need to go through a formal write to the TGA, make the application, and wait for approval. Whereas category A is more of a notice requirement. So the GP fills out the special access scheme paperwork in respect of a patient, but it's a compassionate access. So you just need to give the TGA notice that, hey, Dr. Dowling, just going to roll with that, has decided to prescribe this person who has less than 6 months to live with medicinal cannabis, and the TGA doesn't have any issues with that, so long as that criteria are being met. Category C, I hate to say it, Mitch, but I've gone blank on that one. We'll have to.
Isn't that the research one?
I don't know. We'll park that. I'll do a quick recap on category C SAS application.
Pretty sure it's for research purposes, which doesn't apply to the. I think so. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
we don't really deal with it that often, so.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know as much about category C as I do about category D, which doesn't even exist. But no. So yeah, prescription lands at the pharmacy, and either accompanied by a special access scheme approval letter for a category B application, or just the script itself. And by the way, I can just imagine that anyone listening to this who sources medicinal cannabis from the black market is thinking, oh my goodness, how many hoops do these people have to jump through in order to legally obtain medicinal cannabis? And to those people, I would say, definitely that's true, but at least you do know what you're getting when you get it legally. And that's not having a stab at black market. We know that it's a bit of a roll the dice exercise. You just don't know for a lot of people. So maybe you can take us through the steps that are involved once the script is sent by the doctor to the pharmacy, either with or without an SAS category B approval letter.
Yeah, definitely. So actually just trying to do a little quick Google on this SASC to remind myself. But I was just getting a list of all the different stuff you can get. It's quite
while you're doing that, I'll take the pharmacy. So the pharmacy receives it. They're going to contact you and say, hey, we've received a script. The pharmacy may need to, depending on whether or not they have stock of the product that your doctor has prescribed to you, they might need to order that product from the manufacturer or the sponsor of that medicine, and await for that to arrive at the pharmacy. But hopefully the pharmacy has the product, and if they do, then they will contact you as soon as they do to say, we've got it. Either come to collect it, or we, in some cases, we'll mail it to you. And that's it. But it's not over yet, because, of course, your doctor will need to monitor your progress. So it's, I guess, customary that your doctor will say, all right, I am going to put you on this second line of therapy or last line of therapy, which is medicinal cannabis. But it's not conventional. So I want to see how you're going with it. I want to see if you are experiencing any side effects. I want to see if it's working for you. So let's schedule a follow-up appointment in, I don't know, a month, couple of months from that first consultation. And that is a really critical part of the process. It's not just to jump through all these hoops and get your medicine and that's that. It's really important that you, at least initially, participate in that ongoing monitoring to see how it is you're going. I know there are some proponents of medicinal cannabis that say that, that's a bit onerous, and that, opioid treatments like oxycodone and, otherwise known as endone, don't require necessarily patients to come in. And I agree with that. I think that anything that has the potential for a psychoactive response or dependency issues, not that cannabis generally does, but you really should be checking in with your doctor. It shouldn't just be, hey, here you go, see you later. So that's a really big part of it too, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And just coming back to the SASC, I was getting confused with the types of imports that you can do in Australia with the ODC. SASC is the notification of use of specified therapeutic goods. So it's not actually applicable to cannabis in Australia. That's why I remember it not being. I was like, SASC, I don't remember being a way. But it's applicable for other medicines, but not cannabis. So it's just really those three ways at the moment.
And if you have another obscure medicinal cannabis regulatory inquiry, you can send a letter to please solve my problems, care of Mitchell Kurtz, your capital city. No, but that was very well played, Mitch.
I've got a few in the inbox, actually.
He forwards them to me because I'm the lawyer. So I end up dealing with
it. Do you? No, I'm kidding. You're very diligent. So where were we? We were talking about, the follow-up. Absolutely. And then obviously speaking, the pharmacy part is interesting. There's quite a few different ways that actually plays out depending on the product you get, I guess. There's different companies have different agreements with different pharmacies. Some will deliver it to basically anywhere you are, your closest pharmacy. Some only work with specific pharmacy partners. You have to go through their network. We're seeing different companies kind of involved in different capacities with how their distribution network occurs. But essentially these days, and especially after now the COVID situation that we've had for the last, basically year, it's much more frequent, much more common for you to just receive it in the mail from whichever pharmacy. And usually, there'll be a little dispensing fee on top for that, and a postage fee. But the convenience, I think people are really moving towards that, and it applies for cannabis as well. You just get it in AusPost, I guess. Express, tracked.
Maybe in the future, not so far away, we'll have drone fees that we have to pay. It's a little drop-off scenario.
How many regulatory hurdles are in that one on all sides?
Some level of interplay between the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, the Office of Drug Control, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, the Victorian Department of Health. No, just a few government heads needing to have a chat about that one. But
you're just trying to flex your authority, regulatory body knowledge. Well, it's working. Okay, is it worth talking? I think it's worth talking a little bit about the conditions that it's currently kind of prescribed for, but we might even save that one for the next potty.
That was a good teaser, Mitch.
Well,
no, I like it.
We've given a bit of a teaser today on the, I think the next one we'll talk a little bit about the types, the side effects, how it's taken, the formats, all that kind of stuff. I think would be a great next little exploration. But
absolutely. And I mean, the TGA publishes freedom of information data about what conditions they are approving medicinal cannabis treatment for. So I might do a little recap. I haven't looked at some of that information for a few months. So I'll see if there's any new and exciting conditions.
There was an update
popping up.
I don't know about exciting conditions, but it's exciting that they might be being used for those conditions.
I was thinking of erectile dysfunction, but anyway.
Has it helped you, or?
Not so much, to be honest. I'm more about the conventional treatment.
You're pushing through. No, that's not what I meant. Not that way. Excellent. All right. Well, it sounds like we've got a great next podcast lined up, and something that's very interesting. And maybe I'll even have a few words on that one.
Yeah. And thank you, by the way, for sticking with it. We know we can ramble on a little bit and we go off on these tangents, but hopefully you're enjoying it. And one of the things that we'll probably end up doing is putting in some markers about when exactly in our 58-hour video we get to the question of how does access work.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. We'll
start doing that, but we definitely thank you for your patience. And any time outside of these podcasts, you've got any questions, you can always contact us. Our details
through AltMed.
So yeah, we just, as you can tell, we love talking about it. So
and topics, we'd love to take some topics, suggestions on things you want to know about. So as we start to build a bit of a base, definitely interact with the community a bit more, because that's what we love doing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mitch. You're a fantastic special guest and co-host.
And listener on this occasion.
Listener. All right. We'll see you next week for episode 3. Thank you very much, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.